The day I buried my 6-month-old daughter, my parents were clinking champagne glasses at my brother's pool party. When I told my mom Grace had died, she said, "It's just a baby. Your brother's party matters more." I stood alone at the funeral, but I didn't stay silent. 6 months later, I walked into their house with a photo, a letter, and the truth they'd spent a lifetime ignoring. What happened next changed everything, and no, I don't regret a single word. I'm Claire, 29, and I stood alone at my baby Grace's funeral while my parents attended my brother's pool party. My daughter was only 6 months old when SIDS took her from me. As I watched her tiny white casket being lowered into the ground, my mother's words echoed in my mind. "It's just a baby. Your brother's party matters more." That day, something inside me shattered beyond repair. Before I tell you how I made them face the consequences of their choice, let me say this. This story of family betrayal might make you rethink who deserves your loyalty. Growing up, I always knew I was second best. My brother Brandon, now 32, was the golden child from the moment he was born. Our parents, Linda and David, 58 and 60, created a family dynamic where his achievements were celebrated with extravagant parties, while mine were acknowledged with an obligatory card, if remembered at all. When Brandon made the soccer team in 5th grade, my parents threw a backyard barbecue with all our relatives. That same year, I was accepted into the honors program. They simply said, "That's nice, Abby," before asking Brandon about his upcoming game. This pattern continued throughout our lives. Brandon's average grades were praised as the efforts of a well-rounded individual, while my straight A's were expected and unremarkable. By high school, I'd accepted my place in the family hierarchy. I focused on building my own life, excelling in academics, and forging friendships with people who actually valued me. I met Ryan during my sophomore year of college. He came from a warm, supportive family that initially felt alien to me. His parents showed interest in his day, remembered important events, and expressed pride in his accomplishments. At first, it seemed theatrical until I realized that was what normal family love looked like. Ryan and I dated throughout college and married 3 years ago when we were both 27. He's an architectural engineer, and I work as a pediatric nurse. We bought a small starter home about 40 minutes from my parents and an hour from his. The distance from my family was intentional, though I never admitted that to Ryan. When we announced our pregnancy, Ryan's parents immediately started planning the baby shower, asking about nursery colors and sending us parenting articles. My parents' response? "Oh, that's nice. Did Brandon tell you he might get promoted at the firm?" They attended the baby shower organized by my in-laws, but spent most of it talking about Brandon's recent vacation to the Bahamas. Brandon's life always followed a predictable pattern of success. After college, he joined a prestigious marketing firm, bought a luxury condo, and dated increasingly attractive women. Each achievement was celebrated lavishly by our parents. When he purchased his condo, they helped with the down payment, something they never offered me, despite my student loans. When I once mentioned the discrepancy, my mother replied, "Brandon has a more expensive lifestyle to maintain. You and Ryan are more practical people." Grace was born on a snowy January morning. She had Ryan's dark hair and my blue eyes. Holding her for the first time, I felt a love so intense it physically hurt. Ryan's parents arrived at the hospital within hours, bearing gifts, tears, and joy. My parents came the next day, stayed for exactly 45 minutes, and left when my mother remembered she had a hair appointment. Over the next 6 months, Ryan's parents visited weekly, sometimes just to give us a break. They took thousands of pictures, created a special photo album, and constantly told us what a beautiful family we were. My parents visited twice. Once when a book club friend insisted on seeing the baby, and again when they were nearby for one of Brandon's work dinners. They held Grace like she might explode, seemed relieved when she cried, and barely spoke to her. Despite their indifference, I sent weekly photo updates, her first smile, first roll, first laugh. My mother occasionally responded with a thumbs up emoji. My father never responded. 2 months before Grace died, Brandon announced his engagement to Lauren, a pharmaceutical sales rep. My parents were ecstatic and immediately began planning an elaborate engagement party. My mother called daily with updates about the venue, the menu, the guest list. The party was scheduled for the same weekend as Grace's church dedication, a ceremony they had already promised to attend. When I reminded my mother of the conflict, she said, "Oh, we'll have to miss the baby thing. This is Brandon's engagement." A baby dedication only happens once too, I wanted to say. But I swallowed the words as I always had. A week before Grace died, she had a minor cold, just some congestion. Her pediatrician said it was nothing serious. I stayed home from work, and she seemed better by the weekend, eating, smiling, giggling. I had no way of knowing those would be our last days together. On a quiet Tuesday night, Ryan and I put Grace to bed around 8 p.m. She was completely normal that day. We had dinner, watched a show, and went to bed around 11. The baby monitor remained silent all night. When I woke at 6 a.m. for my shift, something felt wrong. Grace usually woke at 5 to feed. I went to her nursery, the soft yellow room with woodland creatures on the walls. She lay still in her crib. Too still. "Grace," I whispered, touching her cheek. It was cold. What followed exists in fragments. My screams, Ryan sprinting into the room, trying CPR on our daughter's tiny body, my shaking hands dialing 911. Paramedics. The ambulance. The hospital. A doctor with kind eyes. "I'm so sorry. Your daughter died from what appears to be sudden infant death syndrome." We were stunned. We'd done everything right. Bare crib, back sleeping, ideal temperature. Still, we were asked if we wanted to hold her one last time. We did. I called my mother. "Mom, Grace died last night. SIDS. We're at the hospital." There was a pause. "Oh, Abby, that's terrible." No gasp. No tears. No "we're coming." Just flat words. I told her we needed to arrange the funeral. "Yes, I suppose you do. Let us know the details." In contrast, Ryan's parents dropped everything and drove to the hospital immediately. The funeral was scheduled for Friday at 11 a.m. at Greenview Cemetery. When I told my mother, she replied, "Oh dear. That's the day of Brandon's pool party. We've already committed to that." I was stunned. "Mom, this is Grace's funeral. Your granddaughter's funeral. We can't cancel on Brandon now. You understand, don't you?" "No, I don't." "Abby, think rationally. It's just a baby. Your brother's party matters more. You can always have another baby." That was the moment something inside me died, too. I hung up. The morning of the funeral was cruelly bright. As I dressed, I kept hoping they'd change their minds. They didn't. Instead, Brandon sent a text. "Sorry about the baby. Hope the funeral goes okay. Excited to see everyone at the party later." At the cemetery, Grace's white casket looked like it belonged to a doll. Ryan held my hand. His parents wept beside us. Friends, coworkers, patients' families, even people from church came. But not my own parents. Not Brandon. During the service, my phone vibrated. I later saw it was Instagram notifications. Brandon had posted party photos, my parents in them, smiling with champagne flutes, 3 miles away from where we buried my daughter. Back at our house, I moved through the wake like a ghost. I couldn't eat. I couldn't speak. I kept listening for Grace's cries on the baby monitor we hadn't taken down. That night, we sat in Grace's nursery, frozen. Her crib, her diapers, the rocking chair. We left everything untouched, clinging to the illusion she might return. A week later, my mother called. "Abby, how are you? My daughter died and was buried without her grandparents present. How do you think I am?" "Abby, there's no need for that tone. We're calling to invite you and Ryan to Sunday dinner. Brandon and Lauren will be there. It might take your mind off things." I hung up. Against my better judgment, I agreed to go 2 weeks after Grace's funeral. I needed to see them, to understand how they could be so heartless. We arrived at the house where I grew up. My mother greeted us with air kisses, careful not to smudge her lipstick. My father barely looked up from his paper. Brandon and Lauren sat on the couch, wedding magazines spread before them. "Abby, Ryan, come in. Dinner's almost ready," my mother chirped. And that's when I knew they weren't just indifferent. They were irredeemable. Brandon was just showing us the venue they're considering for the reception. "It's absolutely breathtaking," my mother said. No mention of Grace. No acknowledgement of our loss. No recognition that we might not be in the mood to discuss wedding venues. We sat stiffly on the love seat while Brandon dominated the conversation with details about the wedding budget, the guest list, and honeymoon options. My parents hung on every word, offering suggestions and approval. I noticed a new photo on the mantle, Brandon and Lauren at the pool party. The same party they had chosen over Grace's funeral. During dinner, my mother served roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, Brandon's favorite. The conversation revolved entirely around his promotion at work, Lauren's dress shopping plans, and my parents' ideas for the rehearsal dinner. Finally, during dessert, I couldn't take it anymore. "Did Grace's funeral interfere with your pool party?" I asked, my voice cutting through a discussion about wedding photographers. The table fell silent. My mother's smile froze. "Abby," she said with a nervous laugh, "let's not bring up unpleasant topics at dinner." "Unpleasant topics?" I repeated. "You mean my daughter's death? Your granddaughter's funeral that you skipped?" "Now, Abby," my father interjected, "what's done is done. No sense dwelling on the past." "The past?" "It was 2 weeks ago." Brandon rolled his eyes. "See, this is why we didn't want to bring it up. You always make everything so dramatic." I stared at him, incredulous. "Dramatic? My baby died, Brandon. Died. And none of you came to her funeral because you were too busy having a pool party." "It wasn't just a pool party," my mother said defensively. "It was a celebration of Brandon and Lauren's engagement. We'd been planning it for weeks. We couldn't cancel at the last minute. But you could miss your granddaughter's funeral. You could tell me it was just a baby and that I could always have another one." Ryan, who had been silent until now, put down his fork with a clatter. "I've sat here trying to be respectful," he said, his voice trembling with restrained fury, "but this is beyond belief. Do you have any idea what Abby has been through? What we've both been through?" My mother looked affronted. "Of course we do. We're very sorry for your loss. But life must go on, mustn't it? Dwelling in grief isn't healthy." "It's been 2 weeks," Ryan said, dangerously quiet. 2 weeks since we buried our daughter, and you haven't once asked how we're doing. You haven't offered to help. You haven't acknowledged our pain in any way. We thought it best to give you space," my father said. "Space?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot more like indifference. It looks like you care more about Brandon's engagement party than your own granddaughter's death." "That's not fair, Abby," Brandon said. "Mom and Dad had already committed to my party. They couldn't be in 2 places at once. They made a choice, Brandon. And they chose you. As they always have." A tense silence fell over the table. Lauren studied her plate, visibly uncomfortable. "Actually," my mother said after a moment, "several relatives asked where we were during the funeral. We told them we couldn't attend due to health issues. Your father's back, you know." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "You lied," I whispered. "Well, we could hardly tell them we were at a pool party, could we?" she replied, as if it were perfectly reasonable. "People wouldn't understand." "I don't understand," I said, standing. "And I never will." Ryan and I left without finishing dessert. In the car, he held my hand as I sobbed, the full weight of my family's betrayal crashing down on me. Over the next month, our marriage strained under the dual burdens of grief and family tension. Ryan and I began seeing a grief counselor who specialized in infant loss. During one session, Dr. Morgan asked about our support systems. "Ryan's family has been incredible," I said. Mine, less so. When I explained what had happened, Dr. Morgan's professional demeanor slipped, just for a second, revealing shock before she composed herself again. That sounds incredibly painful, she said gently. Have you always felt that your parents favor your brother? That opened a floodgate. Week after week, I unpacked a lifetime of subtle and not-so-subtle favoritism. The missed dance recital because Brandon had soccer practice. The forgotten birthdays that coincided with his events. The college fund that was half the size of Brandon's because, as my mother once put it, girls usually get married and have a husband to take care of them. Dr. Morgan introduced terms like golden child and scapegoat. She explained narcissistic family systems. And with each session, I gained more clarity. This wasn't just about the funeral. This was about a lifetime of being treated as less than, culminating in the ultimate dismissal of my most profound loss. What do I do with this knowledge? I asked her one day. How do I move forward? That depends on what you want, she replied. Some people choose to maintain limited contact with strong boundaries. Others find they need a clean break. What feels right to you? I thought about my parents' cruelty, about the silent moments of grief I'd endured while they toasted Brandon's future. I thought about Grace, how she deserved grandparents who would have moved heaven and earth to honor her life. I think, I said slowly, I need them to understand what they've done. Not just to me, but to Grace and to her memory. And if they can't or won't acknowledge it? Dr. Morgan asked. Then I'll have my answer. That night, I told Ryan, I need to make them understand. I need them to feel a fraction of the pain I felt, standing at that funeral alone. Ryan looked concerned. What are you planning to do? Nothing destructive, I assured him. Just the truth. The truth they've been avoiding for years. I'm worried about you, he admitted. Confronting them might make things worse. Worse than losing our daughter and being told it doesn't matter because she was just a baby? Worse than standing alone at her funeral while they partied 3 miles away? I don't think that's possible, Ryan. He held me close. Whatever you decide, I'm with you every step of the way. That night, I made my decision. The time for silence was over. I didn't want revenge. Not exactly. What I wanted was acknowledgement. Recognition of the pain they caused. Understanding of the damage they did. I wanted them to feel the weight of their choice. To see it clearly, for what it was. Above all, I wanted to make sure they could never rewrite history. Never pretend they had been supportive when they were anything but. I'm not doing this for them, I explained. I'm doing it for me, for Grace. I need to speak my truth, to stand up for her memory. If I just disappear from their lives, they'll rewrite the narrative. They'll tell everyone I was too consumed by grief, too unstable, too unreasonable. I need to make it clear exactly why I'm making this choice. I understand, Ryan said. Just remember, whatever happens tomorrow, you have people who love you. Who really love you. I held him tighter, grateful for his unwavering support. The next morning, I placed a framed photo of Grace in my purse, along with documentation and a letter I had written expressing everything I needed to say. I dressed carefully, a soft blue blouse, Grace's favorite color, and the necklace with her birthstone that Ryan had given me after her birth. Ready? Ryan asked. I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. My parents' house looked exactly the same as always. Immaculate lawn. Trimmed hedges. Fresh flowers in the window boxes. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering the strength for what was to come. Finally, I got out, grabbed my purse, and walked to the front door. My mother answered, wearing a floral dress and pearls, as if this were a social call rather than a reckoning. Abby, come in, come in. Your father's in the living room. I've just taken the lemon cake out of the oven. The house smelled of lemon and sugar, a scent that once meant comfort, but now felt like mockery. My father sat in his usual armchair, newspaper folded beside him. He stood as I entered and gave me an awkward pat on the shoulder. That was the closest he ever came to affection. Good to see you, Abby. You're looking well. I wasn't. I had lost weight, had dark circles under my eyes, and my skin was pale from weeks indoors. But my appearance had never mattered to him. "Let's have some cake first," my mother suggested, already heading toward the kitchen. "Then we can talk." "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than expected, "I'd prefer to talk first." They exchanged a glance, the look from my childhood that meant she's being difficult again. "All right," my mother said, sitting on the couch. "What did you want to discuss?" I sat opposite them, placing my purse beside me. "I wanted to talk about Grace's funeral. And why you weren't there." My mother's smile tightened. "Abby, we've been through this. We had a prior commitment." "A pool party," I said flatly. "An engagement celebration for your brother," my father corrected, as if that somehow changed things. "I'd like to show you something." I reached into my purse and pulled out Grace's photo, a professional portrait from when she was 4 months old. She was wearing a pink dress, her blue eyes bright, her gummy smile lighting up her face. I placed it gently on the coffee table between us. My parents glanced at it uncomfortably but said nothing. "This is your granddaughter," I said. "This is Grace. The Grace whose funeral you skipped to attend a pool party. The Grace you referred to as just a baby. The Grace your son, my brother, visited exactly once in her entire life." "Abby," my mother began. But I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. For as long as I can remember, you've made it clear that Brandon matters more. His achievements, his milestones, his happiness, always more important than mine." I accepted that. "I built a life with people who valued me despite your indifference. But when you chose to skip Grace's funeral, when you dismissed her death as insignificant, you crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." I pulled out a folder and opened it. "I've been thinking about this a lot, trying to understand if this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern. I think the evidence speaks for itself." I handed them a printed timeline: birthdays forgotten because of Brandon's soccer tournaments, my college graduation dinner cut short because Brandon had a date, the unequal financial support. My parents looked at the papers with expressions of confusion and defensiveness. "What is this supposed to be?" my father asked. "A record of your choices," I replied. "Choices that culminated in the most painful day of my life, when I buried my daughter alone, while you celebrated with Brandon." "You weren't alone," my mother protested. "Ryan was there. His parents too." "Yes, thank God for them. But my parents, Grace's grandparents, chose a party over her funeral. And then lied to the family about why." My father's face reddened. "We didn't think it would look good." "No, it wouldn't," I said. "Because it wasn't good. It was cruel. It was selfish. It was the clearest possible statement of your priorities." I pulled out my phone and showed them screenshots, Brandon's Instagram posts from the party. My mother sipping champagne while I listened to a pastor speak over my daughter's casket. My father laughing with friends while Ryan and I threw dirt onto our baby's grave. "Do you have any idea what it felt like to see these?" I asked, my voice finally cracking. "To know that not only were you absent, but you were celebrating." My mother's composure finally broke. Tears streamed silently down her face. "What do you want from us, Abby? We can't change what happened." "No, you can't. But you can acknowledge it. You can stop pretending it was acceptable. You can recognize the pain you caused." "We're sorry you were hurt," my father said stiffly. "That's not an apology," I replied. "That's placing the blame on me for being hurt, not on you for your actions." A tense silence fell. My mother looked to my father as if expecting him to fix this. But even he seemed to know that his usual tactics wouldn't work here. "What is it you want us to say?" she asked, frustration edging her voice. I pulled out the letter. "I don't want you to say anything. I want you to listen." I began to read. "Dear Mom and Dad, I'm writing this because I need you to understand what your choices have meant to me. When Grace died, my world collapsed. The only thing that could have made that pain worse was facing it alone. And that's exactly what your choice forced me to do. When you told me that Grace was just a baby, that Brandon's party mattered more, you didn't just miss a funeral. You invalidated her entire existence. You told me that my child, your granddaughter, was disposable. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being treated as less than. I'm not writing this to hurt you or extract an apology. I'm writing because I see the truth now. I understand that this will never change because you don't want it to. I need to protect myself and Grace's memory from further harm. So, for now, I'm stepping back from our relationship. I need time and space to grieve and to heal. If someday you're willing to acknowledge what happened, to take responsibility without excuses, to commit to change, then maybe we can begin again. Until then, this distance is necessary. For me. For Grace. With sadness and resolve. Abby. When I finished reading, my mother was crying, mascara streaked down her cheeks. My father sat rigid, jaw clenched, but his eyes betrayed something rare, uncertainty. You can't be serious, he said. Over one missed event? I folded the letter and returned it to my purse. It wasn't one event. It was the final event in a lifetime of them. I'm not cutting you off permanently. I'm stepping back until you can acknowledge reality and commit to change. This is ridiculous, my father muttered. Everyone has favorite children. It's natural. We've done everything for you. Robert, my mother interrupted, her voice sharp. She was staring at Grace's photo. Stop. The room fell silent again. She reached for the photo with trembling fingers. She had your eyes, she whispered. Yes, I said. She did. I never really looked at her, she admitted. I was always so busy with Brandon's things, with the engagement plans. Linda, don't, my father warned. No, I said firmly. Not this time. This is my line in the sand. I stood, gathering my things. I've said what I came to say. The ball is in your court. I hope someday you'll understand and make different choices. Until then, I need this distance. As I turned to leave, my mother called after me. Abby, please, don't go like this. I paused at the door. I'm not going anywhere, Mom. I'm right where I've always been. You're the ones who weren't there, when it mattered most. I walked out of their house with a strange mix of grief and liberation. In the car, I sat for a long moment, hands shaking but mind clear. I had spoken my truth. I had stood up for Grace. And for myself. Whatever happened next, it was on them. I had said what I needed to say. And now we wait. Either they'll recognize what they've done and try to make amends, or they won't. Either way, I've done what I needed to do. For Grace. For myself. That night, I slept better than I had since Grace died. Not because the grief was gone, it never would be, but because I'd lifted the additional burden of pretending my parents' behavior was acceptable. I had honored Grace by insisting her life, and her death, mattered, regardless of what anyone else believed. 6 months after the confrontation with my parents, I stood in the garden we'd planted in Grace's memory. Spring had arrived, bringing daffodils and tulips around the small angel statue at the center of the space. Ryan worked beside me, carefully placing mulch around the perennials that would bloom throughout the summer. It's looking beautiful, he said, standing to wrap an arm around my waist. Grace would have loved playing here. The pain of those words still cut deep, but no longer debilitated me. Yes, I agreed. She would have. In the months since that day, we had created a new normal. I attended a support group for parents who had lost children 3 times a week. Twice a month, Ryan and I met with Dr. Morgan to work through our grief as a couple. We had converted Grace's nursery into a memorial room, not a shrine, but a quiet, peaceful space filled with her photos, her favorite toys, and a comfortable chair where we could sit and feel close to her. My relationship with my parents had also changed, though not in the way I had initially expected. After the confrontation, they retreated into silence for several weeks. Then, surprisingly, it was my father who reached out first. A handwritten letter arrived exactly 3 months after Grace's death. Abby, I have never been good with emotions or admitting when I'm wrong. But after reading your letter again and again, after seeing the timeline you created, after hearing from relatives who attended Grace's funeral, I can no longer deny the truth of what you said. We were wrong. Terribly, unforgivably wrong, not just about the funeral, but about many things over many years. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve the chance to make amends. But I want you to know that I hear you. And I am sorry. Truly sorry. It wasn't perfect. It didn't address everything. But it was the first genuine acknowledgement I had ever received from my father that he had caused me pain. My mother's response came a week later. A small package containing a custom-made ornament, Grace's name, birth date, and a pair of angel wings. The note inside read, simply, I should have been there. I will regret that choice for the rest of my life. I'm so sorry, Abby. These gestures didn't erase the past. They didn't undo the damage or bring Grace back. But they were steps, small, hesitant steps, toward acknowledgement. And maybe, toward healing. We established careful boundaries. Monthly dinners, first just my parents and me, and later including Ryan when he felt ready. Ground rules. No dismissing Grace's memory. No changing the subject when grief surfaced. No comparisons to Brandon's life. Brandon himself had been another surprise. After initially reacting with anger, he showed up at our door one rainy afternoon in April. I've been thinking, he said awkwardly, standing on the porch. About what happened. About Grace's funeral. About everything, really. He held a small pink rose bush to plant in Grace's garden. As we dug the hole together, he admitted, I never really thought about how things looked from your side. Mom and Dad always made such a big deal about everything I did, it just seemed normal. I didn't realize what you weren't getting. It wasn't your fault, I told him. You were a child too. We were both shaped by their choices. Still, he said, patting soil around the rose bush, I should have been at her funeral. She was my niece. I'm sorry, Abby. That moment didn't erase the grief, but it lightened the heavier burden of feeling unseen, unheard, and utterly alone. As summer turned to fall, I found myself drawn to volunteer work with the local organization that supports parents who have experienced infant loss. My background as a pediatric nurse gave me the technical knowledge, but my personal experience gave me something else. Understanding. Connection. During one support session, a young mother named Megan broke down in tears. Her in-laws had suggested she should just try again, barely a month after losing her son to a congenital heart defect. They don't understand, she sobbed. They act like he was replaceable. Like any baby would do. I took her hand. I understand. My parents missed my daughter's funeral for a pool party. They told me she was just a baby. That my brother's engagement celebration mattered more. Megan's eyes widened. What did you do? I stood up for my daughter's memory, I said. I made them face what they'd done. And then I focused on healing myself, with or without their understanding. Did it help? She asked. Standing up to them? I thought for a moment. It didn't bring Grace back. It didn't erase the pain of burying her alone. But it honored her. It said to the world, her life mattered. Her death mattered. And that helped me heal. Working with grieving parents became my purpose. Not replacing Grace, nothing ever could, but creating meaning from the devastation of her loss. Each family I helped was a tribute to her short life. A way to ensure her impact continued. Ryan and I began cautiously discussing the idea of another child. Not to replace Grace, we were both clear on that with each other, and with Dr. Morgan, but to expand our family. The conversations were fraught with fear and guilt. Would loving another child diminish our love for Grace? I asked one night, as we sat in her memorial room. Would every milestone be haunted by what she would have been doing at that age? I'm scared too, Ryan said. But I think Grace would want us to have room in our hearts for another child. Not instead of her. In addition to her. My relationship with my parents continued to evolve. There were setbacks. Moments when they slipped into old patterns, comparing me to Brandon, minimizing my feelings. But there was also progress. My mother began asking about my volunteer work with genuine interest. My father created a small scholarship fund in Grace's name at the children's hospital where I worked. During his birthday gathering, I overheard him say to a cousin who'd recently had a baby, "Treasure every moment. Every single one." I learned that lesson too late, with my granddaughter. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was progress. On the 1-year anniversary of Grace's death, we held a small remembrance ceremony in the garden. Ryan's parents were there, steady and supportive, as always. My parents came, bringing flowers, standing awkwardly but respectfully at the garden's edge. Brandon and Lauren arrived briefly, placing a teddy bear near the angel statue. As we released biodegradable balloons into the sky, I felt Grace's presence, not in a supernatural sense, but in the impact she had left on all our lives. In her 6 short months, she had taught us unconditional love. In her death, she had taught us the fragility of life. And in the aftermath, she had taught us about truth, boundaries, and the power of honoring grief instead of running from it. I had lost my daughter. That would always be true. But I had also found my voice, my strength, and a new purpose born from that devastating loss. For those of you watching who've experienced similar loss or betrayal, I want you to know, healing is possible. Not perfect healing, the scars remain, but enough healing. Enough to find joy again. To build a life that honors both your loss and your future. And that's how I turned heartbreak into healing, not with screaming matches or burning bridges, but by choosing peace, setting boundaries, and standing in my truth. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, growing stronger, and refusing to let the pain define you. If you're carrying the weight of betrayal, know this. You deserve to protect your peace, to invest in your healing, and to walk away with dignity when needed. Have you ever faced a moment like this? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you rose above the hurt.